Hello everyone. So in this video, we are going to be looking at JavaScript variables, and we are going to talk about what is variables. We're also going to talk about the three keywords used for declaring variables in JavaScript. Then we're also going to talk about the differences between those keywords. So if you look at this image I have here on my screen, this image clearly explains what a variable is, and I got this image from MDN documentation. So if you go to MDN documentation to read on variables, you are going to see exactly this image I'm showing you here. Now this image explains the concept of variable to us as a box that stores value. So you can see the box and you can see the value at the top. And a variable can store different values. So it can store an element and it can also store data types. So the data types can be string, boolean, null, array, object, number. As you can see, the first box is storing a string, the second box is storing a boolean value, and the third box is storing a number. So variables are containers, so you can refer to variable as containers that stores values. That's just the simple definition of variable. So I'm going to go into Visual Studio Code, and I just have this HTML template here, so I'll be able to run my code on the browser with live server, and I have my script.js. So we're going to start by talking about the var keyword. So I'm just going to put a comment here and say keywords for variable. And the first one we want to look at is the var keyword. So the var keyword was what was introduced initially with JavaScript. So when JavaScript came, the var keyword was used for declaring variables. And the var keyword is a global scope or a function scope variable, and I'm going to explain what it means. So to declare a variable, you start by the keyword, for example, var, and you put in the name of the variable. So I'm going to declare a variable called person. Now this is called variable declaration. So this is called declaration, and to assign a value to this variable, you need to initialize it. So when you hear the word declaring a variable and initializing a variable, there are two different things. Declaring a variable simply means the creation of the variable, while initializing a variable is assigning a value to that variable. So we can initialize the person variable by assigning a value. So I'm going to assign a value of Peter to it, which is a string. And if I say CLG to log this on my console and log the person variable, I'm not going to save this and split my screen so you can see what you are doing at the same time. So if I open my console, we are going to get a value of Peter from line 5 where we log this variable into the console. So this is how to declare and initialize a variable. Now, what do I mean when I say var variable is a global scope or a function scope variable? So I'm just going to put a comment here, global or function scope. Now, when we talk about scope in JavaScript, there are different types of scope. So we have global scope, we have function scope, and we have block scope. So when you declare a variable like this on your JavaScript file, it's actually declared in the global scope because it's not being surrounded by a loop or a if statement or a function. So it's not put into a block or anything. So the var scope is the var keyword is a global scope or a function scope variable. Let's say, for example, I have a variable called x and I'm setting it to 0. If I say var and I set that the same variable to 1, we're not going to have any issue. So if I log x in the console and save, we are going to get 1 because we are first assigning this to 0, and on that we're assigning it to 1. So we are going to get 1. But you cannot do this with a a variable keyword like let or const. This is going to throw an error. So let's say for example, so this is what I mean when I say it's a global scope variable or a function scope variable. So to explain further, I'm going to put an if statement here. So if I say if, and I'm just going to say if true, so let's just say if true, which will always be true, I want x to be equals to 1. So I'm going to say var. I'm going to use the keyword along with it. So I'm not like reassigning it a new value, I'm redeclaring it. So I'm going to remove this. And if I save, we're still going to get 1. Now the reason it's a global scope variable is because I'm putting it inside a block of code now, inside this if scope, but it's still pertaining to this one we have here. So it's not scoped to this. If it's scoped to this, we're supposed to have 0 when we log it in the global scope. So if I even do clg x here, we're also going to get 1. So you see the 1, we're having 1. So this is what I mean when I said x var, not x. So when I say var, it's a global scope or a function scope variable. So for function scope, I'm going to declare a function. So inside this function, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to call this function func scope. So I'm just going to call this func scope. Then I'm going to set x. So I'm going to say var x equals to 2. Then what I'm going to do is that I'm going to comment this one at this one we have here. I'll bring this x down here. But before logging the x, I'm going to call this function. So I'm going to call this func scope function. And if I save, you see we are getting 0. So this time it's a function scope variable because when you put it inside a function, it's going to pertain to just that scope. So it's not accessible outside that scope. But if I log it within this scope, we are going to get 2. So if I log x like this, we are going to get 2. So you see we are getting 2 at line 19, then we are getting 0 from the global scope we have here at line 24. So this is what global scope of function scope variable mean. When you hear the word the var keyword is a keyword is for declaring global function scope variable. So this is what it actually means. So you can actually do this with variable. You can just say num without putting a name and assign a value to it, and so we can log this and say num, and JavaScript is going to treat this as a global scope variable. So I just want to point out to this. So now let's talk about let. So I'm just going to say let x, just like we did for the var keyword. So I'll not be able to do x because we already have x here. If I do this, it's going to throw an error. So if I save this, we are going to get an error. So we are going to get an error that x has already been declared. But if we change this to var, that error is going to go away. So that's one difference between var and let. So I'm just going to change this back to let, and I'm going to set this to y. So let y, and we have just declared the variable. Now we have to initialize it. So I can say y equals to 2 and save. So if I log y in the console, we are going to get 2. Now you can also do this instead of doing declaring the variable first before initializing it. You can just say let y, then you initialize it at once and give it a value. So say let y equals to 2. But this helps. So when you declare it first and you use this when you actually want to reassign it another value later. And I'm going to talk about the difference between let and const. So we have another keyword called const. They're actually the same, but the difference is that one is a constant, and I'm going to go over that. So let the block scope variable. Let the block scope variable. So I'm just going to put in a comment here. Let the block scope variable. And what I mean by block scope is that not what I actually mean, what the documentation mean when you they say let the block scope variable is that if you put it into any block, it's going to pertain to that block, being it a function, a loop, or if. So let's say, so I'm going to say if. So if I'm just going to do what I did for the verse. So I'm going to say if true, let y equals to 3. Then what I'm going to do is that I'm going to log y within this if statement, and I'm also going to just copy this and log it outside the if statement. So if you notice, I'm just going to make this bigger. We are getting 3 and 2, 3 from line 40 and 2 from line 43 because it's pertaining to just this scope. So even though the name of the variable is the same, by putting it inside the scope, it's limited to just the scope. So if we do for function, so if I say function, and say block scope, so I'm just going to say block scope, and inside this function, I'm going to copy this. I'm just going to copy this, and I'm going to get rid of this one and set y equals to 4. Then I'm going to call this function before um, logging y on the console. You see, we are still getting 2 despite I'm changing the value inside this block scope function and call it the function, but it's going to pertain to just this scope. So that's what the documentation means when they say let a block scope variable, while var is a global scope or function scope variable. Now we cannot do this with let. So let's say, for example, I want to declare another variable with that the same name. So if I say let y, and I think we already do that. So you see, we're already getting an error. So we cannot redeclare this variable. So say cannot redeclare a block scope variable. So this is possible with var, but this is not possible with let and const. So this is for let. So I'm just going to come over here and put down another comment, and I'm going to say const. Now, just like let, const is a block scope variable. Anything you can do with let, you can do with y. With const, anything you can do with let, you can do with const. The only difference is that when you declare a constant variable, you cannot assign it another value. So, for example, now inside this function, I'm going to instead of redeclaring another variable, I'm just going to initialize the variable with another value. So I'm going to comment this one out, and inside this function I'm just going to say y equals to 4. So if I save, you see we are getting 4 now at line 50 where I'm logging y instead of 2, because when this function runs, it's changing this y variable here, it's assigning it to a new variable, to a new value of 4, removing this value of 2 and assigning it a new value of 4. So we can do this with the let keyword. You can assign a new value to the let keyword, but we cannot do that with const. So I'm just going to copy this. So I'm going to copy this and comment it out, and I'm going to paste it here. And I'm going to change this to const. all the let to const. So all the let, I'm just going to change it to const. So if I save, we are going to get an error from line 54 where we are trying to reassign the value. You see everything works. We are getting theory from line 58 when we are logging it into the console. So no error, and we have the same name, but it's pertaining to this scope. But when we try to reassign it to a new value, we get an error. Assignment to a constant variable. So you want to use a constant variable when you don't want the value of that variable to change. But most people mistake const for things like this. So let's say we have an array, we have an array of numbers. So 1, 2, 3, 4. You can actually do this and say array. Then we can access the first index, which is 1, 0, and we can set it to like 5, for example. Then if I log this, so if I log in array and save, it's not going to work because this function is actually blocking the rest of the code, this error we have here. So I'm just going to comment what we have inside this function out, and you see we are getting 5 for the first value. So you can do this with an array. Let's say you can do this with the constant variable. So let's say we have an object. So if I say const object, and let's say we have an object called um, person. Person is set to my name Levi, and age. So age 12, and I'm just going to say um, object dot person equals to Michael, for example. So if I log this in the console, if I log object in the console now, so object and save, we are going to get the person changed to Michael instead of my name. So we can actually do stuff like this with the constant variable, but we cannot directly access the value, reassign the value to a new value. But if we have an object or an array, we can basically access the property and change it. So when should you use var, let, and const? For me, I'm going to say stay away from var. To just avoid var. Don't use it. I don't think there's anybody who still use var. To stick to let and const because there are more better way of doing things. It keeps things steady with your code and everything. So when to use let and when to use const. You use let when you know the variable is going to change along the line. Then you use const when you have a variable that is going to be constant throughout your code. So just like the name constant, so it's something that's not going to change. So alright guys, I hope you enjoyed this video on JavaScript variable. If you like it, support me by sharing this video with your friends. Hit the like button, and if you have not subscribed to this channel, do where to subscribe. I appreciate all your support, and I'm going to see you next time in another video. Thank you.